working. But either way, what's going on, everyone? It is your man, Tony the Tycoon. And if you guys are just joining the channel, just to give you some insight about what the channel is about, who I am, and all of those great things. So my name is Tony the Tycoon Hills. I played almost a decade in the National Football League. And I am on this journey. I'm on this journey of self-discovery, right? And one of the things that I've been tapped into and what I've dedicated my life to is something called the athlete identity foreclosure. The athlete identity foreclosure. And basically what it is at a high level is it's the fact that athletes have been stamped as athletes since the beginning of time. And because of that, when they are removed from the sport by way of injury, deselection, that is the sport no longer choosing you, then they go through this thing called the athlete identity foreclosure, where it causes them not to understand who they are because they haven't done the psychological term of this is called identity exploration. So the reason that I am so passionate about this is because I went through it. Right. So I played, my journey started when I was 11 years old. And, I was one of the top high school players in the country. I also ended up playing overseas in basketball. From there, I went to the University of Texas. I won a national championship there. I got drafted by the Pittsburgh Steelers, won a Super Bowl, went to another Super Bowl. And I won a Super Bowl in 2008, won a national in 2005. And then went back to the Super Bowl in 2010, and I continued to play all the way into 2017. So about a decade in the league. And so for me, my story is a little different than most because I was able to walk away from the game. I no longer had the desire to do it, but I walked away from the game without a plan. And I can tell you that time period for those probably 5, 6, 7 years of being retired has been one of the toughest moments of my life, even with some of the success that I've had with my other endeavors. The aspect of self-discovery is never ending, especially for an athlete's perspective. And so the reason why I am locked in on this is because I want to be able to shed light on it. And I also want to be able to help others that are going through it. So with that being said, there was a podcast that was out where Kobe, there we go again. I'm thinking about Kobe Bryant, Kirby Smart. So for those that may or may not know who Kirby Smart is one of the best college Division I coaches in the entire freaking country, right? I mean, this guy's won multiple championships. The guy is like, he's a dog. And it's funny because he coaches for the Georgia Bulldogs, but he's a dog. But the reason why this was very intriguing to hear him speak was because of the fact that I was at 99, almost 20 years later, 2 decades later, he's still talking about the darkest moment of his life being when the game that he loved, he was no longer allowed to play it anymore because he didn't go to the next level. Right. So he talked about how, he was an athlete. He was a superstar athlete. He played at Georgia. He had all of these accolades and things that were happening. And then boom, the game ends. Right. And so now he's saying he's stuck and he's trying to figure out what he needs to do. He didn't have a job. Right. He's sleeping on his friends' couches. And subsequently, what ends up happening is he goes and he does some volunteer work for the head coach at Georgia. And then thus launches his coaching career, and the rest is history. But the part that I want to focus on is the aspect of him at, 50 something years old, still being able to remember what it felt like when the game that he loved, he was no longer allowed to play. Right. And so when we talk about this from an athlete's perspective, right, my own experiences, the studies that I've been reading for these past few months, one of the things that I've come to realize about AIF, and I'm going to shorten it. So AIF is for athlete identity foreclosure. So I'm just going to say AIF because I don't want to keep saying athlete identity foreclosure. So for those that, that watch this later. But one of the things that you come to find out is the reason that this happens is that at a very early age, right, an athlete is stamped as, you being an athlete. So you see it. You see the signs of this in young kids. Like there's some immense amount of ability. Like my sons have it, right? One of my sons is one of the top players in Dallas in basketball. Another one of my sons, I mean, he's got to be a gymnast. This guy flips in all over the place, right? He's 5, right? And so, there's just athletic talent throughout my children, right? And you can see it early, and you can see it early in other kids. Like some of the things that these 7 and 8 year olds are doing in these Pop Warner leagues and these flag football leagues, like it's crazy, right? And what happens is they're stamped as being the athlete. And so when they're stamped as that, it removes the ability for them to explore their identity in other things, right? Because now they're locked in at a young age with whatever sport it is that they're doing. And as they continue to progress, you go from Pop Warner to middle school. You're still that guy. You start hearing the rumblings of rankings, and then you get into high school, right? And then in high school, that's when it gets serious, especially now in the NIL space, because now you start talking about evaluation. Or this kid, he's going to be this, or this kid is worth this amount, right? And so you start talking about evaluation, right? And then now what happens is they go to that D1 school, right? And then let's take it a step further. Let's say they're one of the few percentage of guys that make it, right, which is less than 2% in the NFL. So let's say they get drafted and they go and they have a decent career. Let's just say they play 6 years. At some point, though, the game ends. And they've had this regimented lifestyle, right, of ball. And I'm an athlete and I do all things athlete. And they've never been able to discover their true purpose. And one of the things that I like to talk to the young guys about that are playing this game is I let them know that, look, your sport is your platform. It's not your purpose, right? And this is coming from a guy that played almost 10 years. And I'm telling you, it doesn't matter. And here's where we start talking about the time horizon in this thing, right? Because some of you may or may not know, but the average career span for an NFL athlete is about 3 years. So technically, a college somebody that is going to college to pursue their career, right, has a longer time frame as a college graduate than an NFL athlete will have as a professional on average, right? And so when you think about that, to have your identity attached to something that eventually is going to end very quickly is traumatizing. So in this space of AIF, what you come to find is in the psychological studies of this, they say that when athletes are removed from their sport, it's similar to them experiencing a death. And I think that that's very interesting, right? The skills that they've been able to acquire in the sport, they don't know how to transfer over into the real world. So I want you to think about this, right? Their career is a sprint, 4 years max. Let's just say 4 years, all right, on average. But then their life is a marathon. And with their life being a marathon, they've only been able to identify in the sprinter's lane, right? So now when that is no longer available to them, they're now out in the wilderness. And in the wilderness space, that's the identity space, the self-discovery space that we start seeing a lot of these people deal with certain situations where it's, psychological issues. There's which leads to depression, which then leads to drug use for those that have families, which leads to divorce, which then leads to financial problems. And so I know we like to throw around all of these stats, right, about athletes and them going broke and all that. And I get that. But what I'm on discovery of is what is the root? We're talking about the systems, right? The symptoms, excuse me. We're talking about the symptoms, but what is the root? What is the rudiment problem, right? And then on top of that, what are things that are being put in place that can reach the athlete enough to be able to open their eyes? We've seen certain individuals have some wonderful success as it pertains to the transitional phase from sport to now moving into whatever it is that they're passionate about, right? I've seen guys go from being professionals to being singers, from being professionals to being and real estate investors from being professionals. You look at Justin Tuck, a freaking amazing story. He's running like a corporate position at Goldman Sachs. You have a lot of you've seen Tom Brady. He's doing his thing in with Oakland. Like there are different individuals that have played the sport. Magic Johnson, Shaquille O'Neal, Michael Jordan, right? And I know those are huge names, but I'm only using them because it's showing you that there are athletes that think about what the next space looks like. Now, granted, these people had tenure on that, right? But you think of somebody who tells their story that didn't have that tenure, somebody like an Emmanuel Acho, right? You know, regardless of what you think about him, he's done a really good job of, having a better career off the field than he did on it, right? So we do see that that's there. But in the space of AIF, what I've come to realize is you have to start thinking about purpose alignment and sole purpose now, right? And so I believe this. I believe that your purpose is found at the intersection of your God-given talent and the people that God has called you to serve. And at the midpoint of that, you find what you're truly aligned to do. For me, I know that this is it. My whole life has led me to this moment. So this is what I'm going to do until God calls me home, right? And it's a freeing feeling to know that you're doing exactly what you were designed and put on this planet to do, right? But there are steps to get to that point. Right. So I'll give you a quick story about me. Like when I retired, I was so indoctrinated with the sport that the day after my retirement, I woke up and the alarm didn't go off and I thought I was late for a meeting. I'm panicking. Right. And my ex-wife at the time told me like, hey, what's going on? Why are you tripping? And I was like, I'm late. I'm late for the freaking meeting. She's like, you're retired. Right. So it just goes to show you that like that psychological aspect of being an athlete and regimented and time frames and all of these things, right? That takes a while for us to leave. As a matter of fact, I was reading a study not too long ago where it says that, athletes still deal with this space all the way up until 15 years after retirement. That is a long time, but it makes sense. It makes so much sense because if you think about if you've played the sport from the time you were 5 years old and you retire at 24, 25, right? Even if you only got 5 years in the league, that's 20 years of ball, right? So now it's going to take you time to figure out what you're supposed to be doing with your life. And so one of the things that I got from some of the experiences in my life is I started creating and writing down frameworks. And one of the frameworks that I wrote down was something called the law of identity. And what the law of identity is it states that we never attach our identity to anything that can be taken away, right? So a lot of times we're looking at the materialistic things that the sport brings to us, but we really need to be focusing on the internal, right? We need to be focusing on who we are, whose we are, and who we serve. What are our value systems? What are our beliefs? What are our other likes in life, right? Those are the things that we need to be discovering even within the sport so that we can start to create an identity that's outside of it because the game, it's not about if, it's when the game ends. And I often tell this to the young men that I coach. I say, hey, look, the best time to have started doing this was 5 years ago. The second best time is right now. So what I want to do is I want to share with you from my book, What to Do When It's Done, Navigating Life After the Game. And this is not a book pub. This is, hey, go to TonyHills.com if you want it. If not, that's fine. It doesn't make me any difference. But I want to share a valuable framework that I have seen work for individuals that are actually actively playing and for those that are in the space to get ready to retire, right? They're getting ready to retire. And so in my book, I talk about this. I talk about a framework called the clarity to creation. Clarity to creation. And in the clarity to creation, it's a 4-step process. The first step is you have to see clearly, right? That's the clarity phase. And so you have to take the time to observe who you are without judgment. And that is so hard for athletes because we are so hard on ourselves, right? You hear it all the time. Like, hey, look, I'm not tripping on coaches yelling at me, man. I hold myself to a standard higher than they do. And that's really great in performance, but it's not so great when you're in discovery, because in discovery, you have to be open and authentic with yourself, right? There's a scripture in the Bible that says, as face looketh unto face, so does one man unto another. Meaning what? That mirror that you have, first is going to identify who you are. And secondly, is going to identify how you see the world, how you see other people, right? So if you're judging yourself based off of the things that you might have thought that you should have aspired and elevated to the level of what you should have elevated to, but you didn't get there in that particular space. If you're judgmental in yourself in that space, guess what? You're going to cast that same judgment on other people in different areas of life. And it might come off to those individuals as though you're a pessimistic, egotistical individual. And the reality is no, I just haven't dealt with the aspect of me, the internal traumas that I had, right? The aspect of me not knowing who I am. I haven't dealt with that. So I can only see the world from one point of view. This is all a part of AIF. This is all happening right now. It's an amazing not in like, oh, wow, this is so great, but just the connection piece of understanding how athletes and why athletes move the way that they move off of the field, why their decision-making or the lack thereof is the way that it is off of the field. It all is there, right? So you gotta get into this discovery mode where you gotta seek clarity, right? The next part of this is you gotta become aware. This is the identity phase, right? In the identity phase, this is, beyond your roles. You ask the question, beyond your roles, like a father, a husband, an athlete, right? Your roles, beyond that, who are you as an individual? And I can tell you that a lot of people that I've asked this question to, both athletes and non-athletes, they have a hard time answering that question because they never sit down long enough to discover it. And here's the reality. It's not a fault. This is not to blame. The reality is that there are a lot of distractions. AI is wonderful. Social media is wonderful. Your favorite television show, awesome. Movies that are coming out, great, right? There's a lot of different literature that's out there, art, whatever it is. There's a lot of different things that are out there that you can get into, but it can distract you from doing the work of discovery about who you are, right? And I find it very intriguing that we will go after a particular objective and a target, right? If we want to get a degree, we'll go get our degree. If we want to get a license in finance, we'll go get the license in finance. We want to be a lawyer or a doctor or a business owner, whatever it is, we will put in work to achieve that. But we will not put in a fourth of that work to achieve understanding of purpose. And this is part of the problem for the athlete, because I've been this person for so long and I'm holding on to this thing that no longer holds on to me. I'm stuck. And now because I've been told how great I am for so long, my pride and my ego won't even allow me to ask for help. And then it ramps up even higher if you're a male, because you're supposed to have the answers because you're making the money, but you don't. And instead of you saying, hey, look, man, I don't have the answers, you use your money to try to solve most of your problems. And now we can start to understand that mentality of how 78% of athletes are in financial distress 2 to 12 years after retirement, and how 16% of athletes file for bankruptcy, right? Because the money is just a tool. And if you don't know how to use the tool, then the money doesn't become a blessing, it becomes a curse, right? Like if I gave you a hammer, it would just be a hammer to you. But if I put that hammer in the hand of a carpenter, that hammer becomes the staple point of the business that carpenter is going to build, or that builder is going to build, right? And so I'm sharing these different analogies to give insight to what the athletes are dealing with. And I'm sharing this to give insight for, if you are an athlete, for you to understand what you have dealt with, what you are dealing with, on what you're getting ready to deal with, because every athlete is going to go through this process, right? The other part of this is the vision. You have to build a vision. So once you know who you are, you have to ask the question of, okay, now what kind of life would I like to design? You have to start building that vision. You have to identify your core values, right? You have to understand your integrity lines, right? You have to understand your sole purpose, who you are, who you serve, right? These are things that we have to sit down and we have to start thinking about. And I know a lot of times we haven't even thought about these things because we've been so engulfed in being the best athlete that we can be. But the most successful people are not only the best at what they do, they're the best at understanding who they are. So the same work ethic that you're putting in and the same vision that you're putting in to get to the next level in your space of sport is the same level, if not more, going 10 times harder of getting to the understanding of who you are as a person and what your purpose is. I said it once, I'll say it again. The sport is your platform. It is not your purpose. And the faster that you understand that, the easier the transition period will be. Because I've seen some guys do some crazy things to stay in the sport. I've done it myself, right? Not talk about the concussions they had, taking all types of shots to make it to the next week, playing with torn this, torn that, broken this, broken that. Like, they've gone through the ringer just to get to Sunday, right? Just to get the game day. And a lot of that, when you sat down and you had real conversations with him, it was like, man, I don't know who I am without this game, and I don't know what I'm going to do without it. And so sometimes that fear is the driving force for a lot of the pain that the athletes are willing to endure because they just don't see a way out, right? And this is in general. I know there's outliers. I'm not talking about the outliers. I'm talking about the general population of sport, right? I'm a part of this group called PAC. And PAC is it stands for Pro Athlete Community. So I'm not only talking to people that played professional football. I'm talking about people that were in the Olympics, people that are baseball players, basketball players. I mean, you name it. You name the sport. If it's professional, they've done it. Soccer, MLB, right? MLS, all of it. And the irony of this is that I've had these same type of conversations with those individuals, and they all saying the same thing, right? I didn't have a purpose beyond the sport. I didn't have a vision beyond the sport. So step 3 is very important in the 4-step sequence. We got to start thinking about and building the vision of the life that you want, right? And then lastly, step 4 is you have to create. This is the execution factor. So in create, you have to break your vision down into goals, right? You have to identify what skills, resources, or relationships you have or that you need in order to achieve that lifestyle that you want, right? So that's one of the frameworks that I've used that has been able to help me. Like I said, it's in my book, What to Do When It's Done, Navigating Life After the Game. You can go to TonyHills.com to get it. But listen, at the end of the day, if you are an athlete, you're a parent of the athlete, a friend of the athlete, or a family member of the athlete, share this video with them, like this video, subscribe to the channel, because I'm going to be going deep and deep and deep every freaking week about this particular issue, because it's near and dear not only to my heart, but it affects so many of the athletes that we admire and we love. A lot of people in this space are dealing with things that most people don't know about. And if there's a message that can get to those individuals that might spark or inspire them to start doing certain things to help, well, isn't that what we were put on this earth for? Hope you got something from this. See you next time. It's your man, Tony the Tycoon. I'm out.